So a while back in December of 2024, wasn't that long ago? Wasn't it an innocent time? December 19th of 2024, Alex Stein and Tim Pool had a very interesting conversation about WW3, Iran, Israel. And I think it's important that we look back because I fear that we are heading into a conflict with Iran. And unfortunately, the USA is going to be paying the price. And in turn, I want to pull up this video here. So shout out to Hotspot. Please be sure to follow them on X. It's a bit of a long conversation. And yes, we could have our differences of opinion with Tim Pool and Alex Stein. But Alex is really bringing up some stuff here that I have to agree with, because I don't want World War III to happen. I don't want any young people to fight in a war. And I don't want this war to come here to the USA. But I think a powder keg is going to blow. I think everything's going to come crashing down. And I think we are at a point of no return. And if I'm wrong, thank God. But if I'm right, it's going to be some tough times ahead.
Just me saying this is going to sound anti-Semitic, but aren't we getting a little tired of how we're about to go into World War III because of Israel? I mean, is that bad for me to say that, Tim? That's a little frustrating that we're going to have to go probably fight a war with Iran. I support Israel. I don't like Hamas. I'm just saying it's inevitable.
But I think you look at the history of Israel and the United States, and I don't see a difference. So,
well, AIPAC controls every election. I don't like that.
I completely disagree. I think AIPAC is. So? I think AIPAC is deeply influential and controls a lot with through their money.
Now I'm going to pause here because we're going to time travel. Remember when Tucker Carlson had Representative Thomas Massey on his show? Y'all remember that? Just want to bring up something here, just because I just want to bring up about the influence of AIPAC, and we'll go right back to the rest of that conversation. But here,
a foreign government playing in our political campaigns openly in that they're showing you they're doing it, but opaquely in that you can't track it because they're not registered. Is there any other Republican who has your views on this?
Well, I have Republicans who come to me on the floor and say, I wish I could vote with you today. Yours is the right vote, but I would just take too much flack back home. And I have
flack from whom?
Republicans who come to me and say, that's wrong what AIPAC is doing to you. Let me talk to my AIPAC person. By the way, everybody but me has an AIPAC person.
What does that mean, an AIPAC person?
It's like your babysitter, your AIPAC babysitter.
To quote Dr. Nick and everybody else who know what I'm referencing, the AIPAC babysitters. The babysitters. That's who's control of Congress. All the babysitters, all of Congress, all the brave congressmen and women, Democrat and Republican, can't make their own decision because they have to run it by their babysitter,
who is always talking to you for AIPAC. They're probably a constituent in your district, but they are, firmly embedded in AIPAC. And
every member has something like this.
I don't know how it works on the Democrat side. But that's how it works on the Republican side. And when they come to DC, you go have lunch with them, and they've got your cell number, and you have conversations with them. So I've had
that's absolutely crazy.
I've had 4 members of Congress say, "I'll talk to my AIPAC person," and it's literally what we call them, my AIPAC guy. I'll talk to my AIPAC guy and see if I can get him to, dial those ads back.
Why have I never heard this before?
It doesn't benefit anybody. Why would they want to tell their constituents that they've basically got a buddy system with somebody who's representing a foreign country? It doesn't benefit the congressman for people to know that, so they're not going to tell you that.
Have you seen any other country do anything like this? Like
no.
Russia obviously determines the outcome of our elections. We keep hearing that. Does anyone have a Putin guy that they talk to?
Not only do they not have a Putin guy, look, they don't have a Britain guy. They don't have an Australian guy. They don't have a Germany dude. It's the only country that does this, that has somebody that uniformly. I guarantee there's some spreadsheet at AIPAC where where the AIPAC dude is who's matched up with the congressman is there, and then all the congressman's votes on the issue. Oh, has the congressman been to Israel? They pay for trips for congressmen and their spouses to go to Israel. I'm not the only Republican who hasn't taken.
So I just found it interesting, okay? Because we're going to go right back to the rest of the conversation with Tim Pool and Alex Stein, but I wanted to put that conversation with Tucker Carlson and Representative Thomas Macy about AIPAC, babysitters, and how it does control our elections and how there's a lot of money. And we all know that money in politics dictates policy in this country.
It wasn't, I don't think it was AIPAC who funded the opposition to Bowman and Bush.
Yeah.
It was AIPAC.
Yes, it was. Yeah, and they didn't get Ilhan Omar out. But the conspiracy that JFK wanted AIPAC to register as a foreign agent, and then conveniently.
Well, I know that,
You've seen that.
But then you say conveniently is connecting a dot that we don't necessarily know we can connect.
That's true.
My point is this: people are only going to vote for a candidate that they want to support. And I was having a conversation when we were at there were two rallies over the weekend: Rescue the Republic and Rage Against the War Machine. And
Yep, and shout out to everyone who was there. I know that Jimmy Dore, Do Dissidents. I know Pasta was, I think, maybe at Rage at War Machine. There was a lot of people there, libertarians, Greens, independents. But I got to tell you, 2024, a lot has changed since then. A lot of people who were anti-war or critical of the establishment seem to be changing their tone now that Trump is in office. And again, there's still no ceasefire. We got this ridiculous trade war that's going on, and who knows what the conclusion is, because I'm hearing from different sides of the aisle, this is the end. And on the other hand, this is also showing that, oh, wait, no, it's just perfectly fine if the markets do go under. I mean, there's so much happening here. And all the while, the American people are on edge. We have a corrupt government. We have corrupt institutions. We have corrupt politicians. We have, of course, a out of control institutions like Wall Street and these big banks. What does the end game look like? And are we left holding the bag? Because sooner or later, everyone's going to have a breaking point.
We're talking to a couple people, and I said, the only reason AIPAC is influential is because most Americans want to support Israel and like what Israel is doing. So AIPAC can target that, run ads, and they get the support. When we have Riley Moore on this show, and he outright says he supports Israel and thinks we should be defending them, I'm like, he's a Freedom Caucus guy, but he really does support and agree with funding and helping Israel. Many members of Congress are not lying to you and are not being tricked into supporting Israel. People in this country
you don't have to be tricked if they're paying you lots of money, Tim. I mean,
I think that's think we've basically, Israel is our project, right? With all the funding we've given.
Say that we're Israel's project.
Yeah, 75 years ago.
Alex Stein writes that one, man. Hey, are we the project? I don't know. I feel a big weight on my shoulders.
When we start funding literally everything, when we're sending them all the resources, when we're like, we control basically whether or not they're going to have military defenses. It's insane to me how people are like, but Israel controls us. And I'm like, dude, Israel has its interests for sure. But I really do think it's simple math. The size of the U.S. is the amount of external influence it has, and the size of Israel is the amount of influence that it has. So it certainly does influence back in a lot of ways, like we saw with the elections of Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman, definitely has an impact. But the reality is, if you go out and poll the average person, they're going to be defending Israel.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm not anti-Israel whatsoever, but I do think this is also weird, is that during this battle, versus occupied versus unoccupied, or however you want to call it, the Gaza Strip melee, that they paused the war temporarily to give them vaccines. Did you see that, Tim?
Mm-hmm. When?
Wait, what?
Recently, yes. Yeah. They stopped. They did a ceasefire. Israel did a ceasefire to give
to allow health workers to go in and give, because it was smallpox, right? Smallpox.
Either smallpox or like
that makes perfect sense.
Polio.
I know, but don't you think that's a little weird? Like, you want to kill somebody, but then you also want to vaccinate them?
Because you don't want the diseases spreading into your neighboring country where you've got secret tunnels underneath where people are running in and could be poisoning groundwater.
And it's worse PR than bombing people, I feel.
Well, what was it?
Yeah, that's true too.
What was what's that? Jose Andres, his World Central Kitchen. They blew up that thing.
That's great.
Don't forget that one. Which, by the way, at least with all the reports coming out about that horrific incident. Those World Central Kitchen Aid workers going from point A to point B already had a planned route, vehicles marked with their logos, delivering food, and then on their way back from point B to point A, kaboom, gone. Like that.
Crazy.
That was pretty bad.
Well,
Like, they were just trying to
look,
give people food.
Sure. And if the argument is Israel is a bit reckless and there's massive collateral damage,
I think that's fair.
and they're and reckless, maybe understand, maybe callous. I got no problem. Criticize Israel for all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's just crazy to me that we've been the principal funders of Israel. Largely for we're going on what, 75 years. When did we start funding this? And then people are like, yeah, the U.S. may have funded everything they're doing, but they control us the whole time. And I'm like, no, we have been trying to overthrow Iran forever. We have been meddling in Iran forever. We have been invading Iraq, None of these things are directly related to us being controlled by Israel, whatever. It's U.S. interests. We went to Libya because Gaddafi was interfering with the petrodollar. Saddam Hussein was interfering with the petrodollar. Israel basically is a vassal state that does what we want, but they also exert in-kind influence back upon us. I think that's true, but I think this is U.S. interests largely.
Well, it's funny you bring up Libya because Muammar Gaddafi was actually, he was beloved by his people supposedly, and that he actually had a dam that gave water to like hospitals to inner Africa, and they blew those dams up, so like they couldn't get clean water. And then now the only place right now where you can buy a slave is in Libya. They have slave auctions.
Not the only place.
Yeah, but Libya wasn't a place in which you could buy slaves. Look, say whatever you want about Muammar Gaddafi. I mean, whatever you want. But what the hell happened? I mean, from before and after, I think a lot of people, yes, you could put on rose-colored glasses and say, yeah, things were better, but I'm going to make the controversial statement here and say, well, at least back then, there wasn't slave trade happening in Libya. At least not on the public, because again, let's face it, there's a lot of nefarious deeds, a lot of nefarious things happen here in the USA, sometimes in the most prettiest of places, like a nice suburban town or an influential neighborhood in a big metropolitan city. Sometimes the greatest evil can hide in the light, but my goodness, what the hell happened in Libya? We're ever going to look into that?
Okay, maybe there's a Uyghur slaves in China, I guess. But
Alex, I got bad news for you.
Well, I went to Libya. I bought
there
one.
are child slaves being transferred across.
I know, and that's what they say. Oh, we need clean energy. Yet you have to use children to mine the batteries or the cobalt.
Yes, but there are horrifying crimes happening on our southern border with childs being brought in as slaves into this country. Like slavery exists, a horrifying thing. But you are correct. Libya basically collapsed, turned into this disgusting slave trade, reignited the North African slave trade. And it was because Gaddafi was largely interfering with Western plans and on the petrodollar.
He wanted to back it by the African dinar or whatever their
gold dinars.
Yeah.
He wanted a union. He wanted to create a powerful bloc, and they were like, take him out
to make his country stronger. So he was being Libya first, and Hillary Clinton in America didn't.
And Hillary Clinton said, we came, we saw, he died, and she left.
Yes, and she laughed. Ha, ha, ha. So let's go forward and talk about why that interview, that conversation way back in 2024, in December, has so much staying power. Because right now, there's talks between the United States and Iran in regards to nuclear weapons. So here we go. Shout out to Case Study QB. Follow him on all social media. We'll return the rest of that conversation, but we are at a point right now where Iranian foreign ministers are confirming that Tehran and Washington, D.C. are set to hold indirect talks over Iran's nuclear program in Oman on Saturday. And the two countries will be able to communicate, according to these notes right here, through intermediaries rather than engaging in direct face discussions. In an interview, Iranian news agencies and the foreign ministers are informing that he and U.S. President Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, will lead the high-level negotiations in Oman. And so this is an opportunity in which potentially maybe there could be a decrease in the possibility of a war taking place. So I want to play this from Case Study QB. There's a little bit more into this.
From President Trump, the U.S. and Iran, he claims, are already engaged in talks over the country's nuclear program. Iranian state media reports that their country's foreign minister will meet with a U.S. special envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, in Oman on Saturday.
I think everybody agrees that doing a deal would be preferable to doing the obvious. And the obvious is not something that I want to be involved with, or frankly, that Israel wants to be involved with if they can avoid it. So we're going to see if we can avoid it. But it's getting to be very dangerous territory.
So the last publicly known time that the U.S. and Iran held direct senior level talks was a decade ago. Joining me now is Holly Dagres, senior fellow at the Washington Institute. Welcome to CNN this morning. We reached out to you because on Twitter you were talking about how Iran needs a deal because it is in a dire situation on the ground, right? Over time, sanctions have had their intended effect. So does that mean it is willing to come to the table?
Adi, thank you for having me on the program. Well, I think it's not just sanctions that's had its intended effects. It's actually mismanagement and corruption as well on the part of the Islamic Republic. And I think that the situation we've seen in Iran for the past few years has suggested that it's not just a dire economic situation, but that the people are very discontent to the point that they've been wanting the Islamic Republic gone. And that's why we saw the 2022 Women Life Freedom Uprising happen. And so given...
Now, I always call into question many of these uprisings that do happen. And, you know, I think we all remember way back when Gaddafi was still in charge, not only was there an uprising in Libya, but across North Africa and the Middle East, it just seemed rather too convenient automatically that all of this was happening. And then we saw the consequences and fallout from it. And even now, as we speak, many of that still resonates, especially with what recently happened in Syria, with the coup that took place and removed its ruling leader, Assad. And now look what's happening in Syria. There's massive amount of political instability. Israel doing strikes there, but also not to mention there are various factions now trying to fill in the void that Assad once filled. It seems to me that every time there is some sort of uprising or anything of that nature, it has the opposite effect of not bringing in democracy, but more instability.
The developments on the ground with the economy, the discontent from the people, and of course the region, they are desperate for some kind of economic reprieve that will help them float for the next 4 years. And that's what they're hoping to get through these potential talks, that if they lead to something.
You were talking about how things have changed in the region. I'm thinking about some military changes, like the New York Times put it this way. They were saying that Iran has lost the air defenses around its key nuclear sites because of precise Israeli strikes since last October, and Iran can no longer rely on its proxy forces in the Middle East, of course, thinking about Syria, et cetera. So this is this like perilous moment militarily as well. Can you put that in context for us?
Sure. Of course, last year we had 2 tit-for-tat strikes between Iran and Israel. Israel had taken out these air defense in Iran. And what we're seeing is that in just the past few weeks, U.S. President Donald Trump had sent a letter calling for talks. And from what we've heard from various sources is that he said, if you don't do these talks, that there will be some sort of military action against Iran, and that they had a 2-month deadline. And of course, Iran had responded that they would want indirect talks. And that's what we've been seeing is actually this potato moment, which is, are these...
So we're going to pause here because talking more about these indirect talks. So a top Iranian official on Wednesday insisted that the talks with the U.S. this weekend will take place through an intermediary, contradicting President Trump's statements that American and Iranian officials will meet face-to-face to discuss Tehran's nuclear program. Iran's foreign minister emphasized talks with the U.S. will be indirect in an opinion article for the Washington Post. Iran is ready to engage in earnest and with a view to seal a deal. We'll meet in Oman on Saturday for indirect negotiations. Yeah, again, so we will see what happens. This is an opportunity, and I, for one, am ever hopeful that it doesn't lead to further conflict. So why did I play that video with Tim Pool and Alex Stein? It's because it still holds true. You know, we have seen throughout all of 2024, since the conflict of Gaza kept on instigating and rising up and reaching numbers of dead men, women, and children, it's very clear that once the conflict in Gaza, once everything was bombed to a moonscape, well, there's got to be other targets. You know, How else can you justify a war? How else can you have a wag the dog moment? Because before October 7th of 2023, there was, of course, a lot of political instability in Netanyahu's government. People forget about the large domestic protests happening against Netanyahu and people wanting him to step down, lack of confidence in his government. And now, since the war has been happening, nothing like a war to distract the people. The bombings in Libya, instability in Syria, and yes, the big shiny object, conflict with Iran. If it escalates, we're going to be dragged into it. We already have a situation that's happening in Yemen with the Houthis. We already have so much involved in that region that it's only a matter of time before possibly there is massive deployment of U.S. troops. I'm reminded of that scene from the movie W, where Dick Cheney is saying we never leave. We're going to be stuck in the desert. I don't want to say that this is going to happen, but this looks like this is going to happen. Now, I hope these talks are successful, but every time there's a talk or every time there's talk of a ceasefire, anytime there's talk of a treaty of peace, a week, and I'm being generous with that time, only in a week does it seem like the conflict rises up again. It's like, oh, it's time to fight again. It's time to fight again. And we're going to be stuck there. Since the war on terror was declared in 2001, it has now been 24 years since the United States has been actively engaged in the Middle East. If there ever is going to be peace, we have to try to achieve it. What does victory look like? What does peace look like? Have we forgotten? Do we want future generations to walk those roads? Do we want to waste trillions of dollars into this? Our politicians don't seem to care, and the American people are the ones to carry the burden.